Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices. Welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast with your host, Brad Marshall. And today I'm excited to be joined by Jason Fernandez, more commonly called Fern, somebody I've known for a couple of years now, and our affiliate Greater Culture has worked with the best hour of their day team. And so I'm excited to dive in and learn a little bit more about his story of the things he's done in terms of military and coaching and running an affiliate and running a business and figuring out ways to develop others. A lot of accolades if you kind of look at where you're at now. But Jay, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what's your story of how did you come to find CrossFit and get into this idea of fitness and turn that into what has now become a career?
Man, unfortunately, my story is not super unique. If I was going to be very honest with you, I kind of found it the same way a lot of people found it in the early days. Like I started CrossFit in 2000, maybe late 2006, early 2007. My wife, honestly, my then girlfriend, actually found it first, and I think sometimes you look back and you're like, sometimes luck and happenstance have something to do with it. And I was fortunate enough to start. Very first gym I ever walked into, CrossFit gym, was CrossFit Virginia Beach, at which point Pat Sherwood owned that affiliate, him. And then very soon after, another guy by the name of Joe Alexander, who's one of the head of the training department inside of CrossFit. So I started with those two guys. And I feel super fortunate, to look back, after 17 years and think about how fortunate I was to start with those two people specifically, who very much, had a lot to do with my development and my path inside of the CrossFit space. So yeah, my wife, found it. She's like, let's go do this CrossFit thing. She had played college volleyball and softball. I had played college basketball, and we were both very, you know, junior naval officers at the time, and trying to find something else to do now that sport wasn't really a part of our lives. And so we went in there, and I tell this story all the time at level ones. My first workout ever was JT. And it did not go well. I did not get a good score. But I came back the next day for a heavy power clean day and redeemed myself. Yeah, and then it was literally, we were just hooked from there. And we were kind of the, mid-20s, train hard during the week, burn the city down on the weekend, and we did that for a long time. And I think we were at CrossFit Virginia Beach for about 18 months before Pat parted ways, and then we kind of bounced around a little bit, and then eventually 2009 we opened CrossFit Rife. It was then GSS CrossFit at the time, but really what has gotten me here today is just a never-ending streak of failures that just fail forward, just doing things really horrendously and then improving on them over time. And that just never stops.
You think about stepping into that CrossFit gym for just own personal fitness, like a lot of folks do. At what point did you realize that, I might want to try the coaching side of the house? Because I think it's really interesting for folks who walk in and they figure out, okay, this is helping my own lifestyle. And then there maybe is a point in time where they're like, maybe I can help others as well. So did you find that there was like, whether you want to call it a specific moment or just kind of a trend over time, that you were like, you know what, I think I can do the same thing that Pat and these other guys are doing?
Dude, I never wanted to be a coach. It was not in the cards. I had full plans, intent, and roadmap to be a dentist. So here's what I did know. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've had plans that I thought I was going to be a dentist, and I was going to do that via dentistry. And I had started going back to night school because I was missing a bunch of prerequisites. So the Naval Academy is it's a liberal arts school on paper, but it's real heavy in engineering, essentially. Everybody takes a core curriculum that's heavy in math and science, but no like no biology, no organic chemistry, or they might have organic chemistry, but I definitely wasn't taking it. So I was probably deficient on like 30 credits to even apply to a dental school. So I started going back to school and, was taking all the anatomy and physiology at night, uh, organic chemistry, a bunch of other classes. And when my daughter was born in 2014, that kind of went off the table. So she was born in some pretty challenging circumstances. She was born 15 weeks premature, and I had literally just started applying to dental schools. And then the closest schools were going to be probably a 2-hour commute at that point. And so that just became something that was not going to be realistic. So I had to kind of also at the same point kind of started doing the CrossFit thing. I've kind of always been a person who I will pursue multiple things at the same time and let life make the decision for me. And at which it did make the decision for me. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm doing this CrossFit thing. And, and I left the service in 2015, roughly, almost exactly a year after she was born. And I was like, all right, well, guess I'm doing this. And the reason I had no intention of being a coach was, this is kind of weird though. Like I didn't have any, it's not that I didn't want to be a coach, right? My dad was a basketball coach. I played for him in high school. We still to this day have a great relationship. But I was like, I'm going to do something else, right? And it wasn't due to any animosity. I was like, I'm just going to chart my own path. And then I kind of like fell back into it. And coaching for me has always been very natural, I guess. Like it was, I think I was very fortunate to be around a lot of good coaches growing up. And so it was something that seemed obvious to me. So when I started coaching CrossFit, it seemed pretty easy, honestly. Not the technical portion, you still have to go through that, but like interacting with people and coaching them, all of that was very much natural to me. That was not a struggle at all. So in that sense, once I kind of figured out that that's where I was going to go, then I was like, oh, all right, well, let's go get good at this then. And then dove in head first, and like everybody else was really bad at it on the front end. You're good at certain things, right? I was good at managing groups. I was good at the presence and attitude piece. But I did not have the technical skills for it. That had to come over time. So I spent a lot of time on that for, 2009 up to seminar staff when I got hired for that in 2013. So it's a good 4-year period of like really trying to get dialed in and nerding out and doing all those things. So
I think it's such an advantage when you have experience being around good coaches, whether it's athletics growing up or interscholastic athletics, or then seeing what great coaching looks like in a CrossFit space. And it gives you this sort of base or foundation of, hey, if that's what right looks like, all I have to do is emulate that. I don't have to recreate the wheel. I don't have to do anything totally different. So I think it helps when you see what right looks like to then dive in and be like, let me just follow in those footsteps, makes things a little bit easier. And then was there a certain point in time as you're like, okay, I want to get better at coaching, and then this entrepreneurial spirit came about of like, I think I can run a gym? Because those are different skill sets. I know you highlight that a lot within Affiliate U. What was that process or transition like of, okay, let's try the coaching thing. Life's telling me this is probably the path I need to go. And then for a lot of folks, if they want to make it a career, they have to essentially start their own gym. So what was that process like?
Mine was, there's really probably no other way to describe it. It was traumatic. And so let me explain what I mean by that. So we had opened the gym in 2009, and candidly, we did it just like everybody else. We're like, we'll just do it. It'll be fine. We're not in it to make money. Like all the the typical quips with regard to, essentially stating without stating that you don't know what you're doing. And I'm no different than anybody in that sense. Like we were able to pay the bills. It was a hobby more than anything. And all the while convincing myself that I knew what I was doing. Right. And then when my daughter was born, it took me a long time to tell this story, but when my daughter was born, she was born really premature. She was born 15 weeks early. She weighed 1 pound, 12 ounces when she was born. 10 out of 10 do not recommend that situation. And I remember my wife had been in the hospital for a couple days, and finally, my mother-in-law was like, go home. I had been at the hospital for like 4 days. So I went home that night, and my mother-in-law called me in the morning, hysterical. And she was like, the baby's coming, and it's happening right now. So I like zoomed to the hospital, got there. Anybody who's ever been, in an ER or in like high risk labor and delivery, knows that it is just pandemonium. I mean, it's just chaos. And so they have to do an emergency C-section. I walk in and the doctor is like, your wife's bleeding. We don't know where it's coming from, but we have to deliver a baby right now. And in that moment, nobody had asked me this to make a decision on anything. Nobody prompted me with any questions. I had just, in the moment when the doctor told me that, said in my mind, I told myself, if they ask me to choose, I'm going to take my wife, not knowing any better. And then we go through the whole thing. They deliver Logan, my daughter, and she's fine, by the way. And in that moment, I realized that I had made a massive error. And so I went back into the NICU, and the doctors are working on her, and I'm just standing there sobbing like an idiot. Because I had now realized the error that I had made. It's like, hey, you have one job as a parent, and that's to protect your kid at all costs. And I had made like the largest error on day one of that job. And as I was standing there having like this weird outer body experience, I realized I was like, if I got that wrong, it's like the one thing I need to get right in life. If I got that wrong, what else am I kidding myself about? And that was a really humbling experience for me. It took me like 5 years to even tell my wife that story. Now, I walked around with that for a long time, really long time. And that went for, I didn't tell anybody about it, but I went through that's when I really started to become a learner. I've always been up to that point in my life, I've been a pretty average is being kind student. And I said, all right, well, if I got that wrong, I'm going to rethink everything. And I'm going to commit myself to learning as much as I can about things that I think I already know a lot about. And that's kind of how that journey started. And in that, it's like reading tons of books. I'm an avid reader now. And I read my first book cover to cover my senior year of college, oddly enough, I'm an avid reader. I've paid for coaches galore over the past 10, 12 years. And I'm constantly like trying to learn. So that was how, technically my entrepreneur journey started earlier than that. But for me, it started the day my daughter was born. That's the day I chose to, or decided, I was like, I'm actually going to try to get good at this, because I fooled myself into thinking that I was something that I was not. And that's a really dangerous path to go down.
Yeah, it almost sounds like now the realization that other people are going to be counting on me, and I have to be accountable to them and to myself, and now I have to do the necessary things to provide food and shelter and all these things, and all of that just kind of comes crashing down at one moment. And there's this idea that I've always really appreciated, which is pain is the greatest cause of change. And if there's enough pain, it's like, oh, now I'm going to do something different. And it sounds like you were having that in that out of body experience, and the person that came out on the other side completely different, in a way that now you're pouring yourself into learning and growing and developing. What did that look like then in terms of you running the gym? You came in after this experience. How did that change how you were showing up, or maybe what the members were experiencing, or how you were operating then?
Yeah, it's, you're right. And I don't think we should breeze over that. That's because we see that with gym owners all the time. Is like and gym owners see this with clients too, is like when their pain has breached the lie that they're telling themselves about them getting fit or getting healthy is the day they show up to your gym. And not all the time, but like a lot of times when gym owners show up to us, is when the pain has exceeded the lie they're telling themselves about that they know what they're doing and it's going to be all right. And they're finally like, I just can't deal with this anymore. Please help me. So none of us are immune to that. That is kind of the natural human evolution until you come to grips with yourself, essentially, and that ego dies a little bit, and you can say, hey, maybe I should ask for help prior to the pain. So for me, it started with coaching. It didn't start on the business side. It started with coaching, and I like dove into that for quite a few years, before I really started to redirect that energy towards the business. I was still continuing to learn about entrepreneurship and the different components of running a business. And I came to the table with some skills due to my previous profession in the military, but it was largely deficient. And so it started with coaching. And then probably once coaching became an afterthought for me, meaning like coaching was the easy part of the day. Like it didn't require a ton of resources for me to run tight classes and, really deliver a good product on the floor. That's when I had the bandwidth to kind of redirect energy and start learning about, business strategy and customer service and budgeting and all those other kind of stuff. And I still am learning more and more every month with regard to all of those things. So it started with coaching just because that's what I was already good at, or I was already better at, I should say. I wouldn't say I was good at the time. And then, as you master things, or like what I like to say is like, as you kind of like create unconscious competence in things, like you free up bandwidth to go learn a new thing. And I've intentionally but unintentionally gotten pretty good at that process over the years, where I'll just deep dive on a thing for 6 months, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I've got enough reps, I got enough information, I've got enough context to figure out how to use this thing appropriately. And then that way you can iterate on that thing, like practically, like I got it, I understand it. Now I'm going to go play with it and put it into the business or put it into practice, and I can update it as I go while learning a new thing when I do it that way. So that's kind of been my process over the years, and it's been really sloppy at times, but I think that's just how entrepreneurship works, man. Like there's no clean path. There's no easy way through entrepreneurship. It's just through, there's no, you don't get to fast forward things. You can in the sense of utilizing other people, but you're never going to bypass the learning process. You can just make it more or less painful.
Yeah. And one of the things I really appreciate about that perspective is you mentioned, after that situation of just being an avid learner, diving in and learning the skill of what it takes to get information in, process it, and then make something happen and take action as a result of it. Because I know from a personal standpoint, like I love learning as well, but we can get caught in just consuming information of like listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, looking at YouTube videos, and you're like, oh, I know all this stuff, but then actually taking the time to put it into practice and do the thing that you know a lot about, whether it is our health and our fitness or whatever it is, we can become experts in the knowledge and the education, but then the application is where the rubber meets the road and we actually see what you can do with it. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, was there something that helped you to then take action on those things? Because you enjoyed learning, you enjoyed deep diving on these topics and coaching and this and that. What helped you to then actually take some of the action of like, hey, I'm learning all these things. I want to grow the business, be a better coach. Now let's do something with it.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I didn't bypass the consumption phase. Like I still had that in the early days where I was just like listening to podcasts and reading books and not really doing a ton with it, honestly. And then I think at one point I realized like, oh, I should probably like put these into play. And for me, I don't know if I would describe myself as a risk taker, but I have a pretty high tolerance for risk. And for the record, that's gotten me in a lot of trouble in many variations, right? So I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that like most entrepreneurs have a higher risk tolerance than most other people. And now many of them will die on that risk tolerance, meaning like it gets them in a lot of trouble, if not ends their careers completely. But for me, one of the things I learned from my dad, specifically when I was playing basketball, was, in basketball, as a point guard specifically, one of the key metrics that you look at for a good point guard is like what's their assist to turnover ratio. How often are you giving the ball away to the other team, in an unforced or forced situation. And he had a not pretty, soft talk acknowledged. He had a rule that was, if you're going to make mistakes, you make them at full speed. So don't second guess the decision. Just make the decision and go. If it doesn't pan out, we'll correct it. But the worst thing that you can do is hesitate. And then the second worst thing that you can do, potentially might even supersede the first one, is dwell on the mistake. And that would, if you ever wanted to get yanked out of a game for anything, it would be for turning the ball over and then pouting about it. And pouting could be like actually pouting, or it could be like not sprinting back on defense after you've made a bad pass or something like that. You would be guaranteed to have a seat on the bench. But it wasn't for the mistake. It would be for the reaction to the mistake. And I've always treated entrepreneurship or business the same way. Because once I realized that like business was my new sport, but I get to play it forever. There's no lifespan on this outside of my own. You start to think, well, let me just get the mistakes out of the way then. If I'm gonna make them inevitably, let me just make them all now. Like, let me make them faster than everybody else. At which point, as long as I'm not being a complete moron, which at times I have been, then I'll just be able to stack the mistakes, or otherwise stated, I'll be able to learn faster than everybody else. Because one of the biggest things that will hold you back in business is like waiting for the right time. Newsflash, there is no fucking right time. Like, it's never going to be right. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to line up the way that you want it to. There will always be variables that you wish were better. There will always be some reason to maybe wait, So I've always been of the mind of like, get the idea to 80% and iterate the last 20. But don't wait to 100%, or don't even wait to 90%. Get it good enough. Because there's just things that you don't know. And you only find out the last 20 to 25% when you put it into play. And you're like, oh, I would have never learned that. There's no book on that. There's no blog article on that. That one is like on the job training only, And so I've always been of the mind, implement quickly, iterate faster than you implement. And that's served me well most of the time, the vast majority of the time.
Yeah, it speaks to this idea of building the plane while it's in the air and getting comfortable with being in that position of knowing you're probably never going to get it to 100%, hands off. So there's always going to be some level of tinkering, but can you get comfortable with it being in that state? And one thing that you mentioned there, this idea of, turning the ball over and then pouting about it, I'm kind of curious, would you say when it comes to how you react to situations, make decisions, things like that, you're a little bit more like analytical, thoughtful, brain side of the house? Or would you say you're a little bit more emotional, like gut feeling, that type of perspective? And I say that because you strike me as someone who's very thoughtful, analytical, and when it comes to situations not going the way you want, I'm going to think through this. I'm going to kind of try and keep an even keel. And others tend to feel things, a little bit more deeply, and the emotions play a big role in how they show up when things maybe aren't going the way they like, or even if they are. So is there one way that you tend to fall between those two?
I guess it would depend on when you ask me that. If you ask me now versus 10 years ago, the answer is probably very different.
Okay.
And here's why. I think when you are new at something, whether it's sports or business or whatever, the reaction to changes in your environment or mistakes are highly emotional. And they're highly emotional because you don't understand things. So you actually have nothing other than your emotions. You have no context, you have no intelligence with regard to the thing, you have no data to work off of. You're just like, this sucks, or it's great. right? And with no context for why it sucks or why it's great. You're just like, I'm the best or I'm the worst, right? With nothing else to lean on other than that. But as you get more experience, as you get more reps, you learn to interpret the successes and the wins a little bit more thoughtfully. So I've gotten better at it. I still think I have a very long way to go. But one thing, I don't know if I would be considered analytical, but one thing I was good at basketball was I was good at strategy. I was good at play calling. I was good at schemes. Because I was a coach's son, so like I understood the game. So I was pretty athletic, but like that wasn't really where I got my leg up a lot in basketball. My where I would contend I had one of the things that even allowed me to play at the Division I level was I was capable of thinking multiple plays in advance and thinking about, hey, all right, I'm going to run this set. If that works, I'm going to run this set, and then I want to switch to this defense. So I was always thinking 3 plays in advance and trying to set up the third play with this one. And like reading other defenses, and if they switched, I'm like, what are we going to do? And, you know, admittedly but at that point in college, I'm maybe 20 years into that, you know, career of basketball. And I'm only now approaching that volume of reps in business. And, you know, probably not shocking, I'm starting to get the same feeling for business, which is I'm starting to see multiple things in advance. But that's just reps. That's reps in understanding why things work and why they don't work. So I would say I'm more of a strategist than maybe analytical, but those you could probably use those, you know, interchangeably. But like I know basketball, so a lot of my analogies and stuff like that are relevant to basketball because that was my thing before this. And understanding like what made me good at that can also make me good at this as well. But the cool thing about entrepreneurship is like there is no ceiling to that. Like it just keeps going. You know, right when you think you know something, you open up a door and you're like, "Oh my God, there's that too." I didn't even know that was a thing. So I guess I go learn that now. You know, so it's that to me now is fun. Is like realizing that there's so much room for improvement that it's like, oh, well, how could you possibly ever get bored?
Fun things, I think, is when you start to see these threads that get pulled from experiences or things people have done earlier in life to how they then relate and pull through later in life. So that idea of being a strategist on the court and being a few steps ahead, or at least just thinking through how things are going to unfold, lends itself really nicely to entrepreneurship and running a business and trying to be strategic in that CEO perspective. And then as you've continued to develop over your career, I always think it's fun to look at the strengths that people have. And it sounds like you're, you know, pretty keenly aware of where you're at now and how you try and help others to find those, because it started with coaching of how do we help you move better, be fitter, use this CrossFit methodology to help improve lives. What started then training coaches, seminar staff, now running Best Hour, where you're coaching business owners, entrepreneurs. What has been some of the things that you've learned over that time period of how you try and help and coach and guide others to go do the thing, whether it's coaching, whether it's business ownership, whatever it might be, that have stood out to you over the years, now hitting that sort of mastery level and number of reps?
I think, well, I definitely wouldn't consider myself a master in the business space, but I always like to think I'm always trying to put myself in a position where I could confidently say better than most, far worse than some. Right. Which is like, meaning like most people I'm better at it than, but there's still people out there that are light years in front of me. And I like that spot. And teaching is teaching. Whether I'm teaching the air squad or I'm teaching you how to budget, the components of teaching are the same, which is keep it simple. And if you're thinking about what we would teach in a level 2 setting, you know, like what's a good cue? One that works, number 1. And 2, what would the anatomy of that cue be? It would be short, specific, and actionable. So how do you take that and then you transfer it over into something like running a business. Well, I need to give you something that is short, specific, and actionable, which is a lot of how we design the curriculum and how we coach people there, which is like, just do these things. That's it. And, maybe I can teach you the underlying principle of that right now. Maybe not. That depends on who we're talking about. Maybe you don't even care. Maybe your pain is so high that you're not prepared to wrap your brain around this principle and you just need to be told what to do. Okay, cool. Check. I recognize that. And one of the things that I do think it is a learnable skill is, first you got to learn to read your teammates. Like, where are they at? Like what is going on? Like, what do I need to give that person to get them going? Because they need different stuff. Right? Some of them need to be yelled at. Some of them need more coddling. Some of them just need a pat on the back. Some of them just need a look, and, when we work with affiliate owners, it's like, that's the game. Like, what does this person need? Do they need a good ass chewing? Do they need a hug, a virtual hug? Do they just need some reassurance that they're doing the right thing, and then meeting them where they're at, and then making sure that we kind of lay out the breadcrumbs to get them going? So it's all the same. It's mastering the art of reading the person in front of you. And I would consider myself, I've always been like pretty good at that, but I think I know, being on seminar staff and having to read thousands of people over the years, facial expressions, body posture, how they react when you say something a certain way, and being able to pivot off of those like very quickly and be like, oh, they didn't like that, I'm going to try it a different way. That's a skill that I'm not even going to sit here and pretend like, oh, I'm just naturally good at it. Like, no, that's 10,000 reps of that to even get remotely good at it. To just read that slight change in facial expression to know that Brad is not really digging that cue that I just gave him. So how do I pivot off of that and like pull Brad back in so that Brad is open to our interaction now? That just takes a lot of reps, man. Like, I don't know how else to say that. That number one is just doing your best to meet people where they're at, and only being married to better. Or like, and anything that gets us to better is on the table. And then the other one that I'm in now, the kind of position that I'm in now, and we were kind of talking about this beforehand, is like learning to build a good team and really starting to recognize position players. And I think a lot of people mess this up. And I've been on teams where I've gotten this wrong on sports teams, and I've gotten it wrong in business too, which is like, you just bring on anybody, or you bring on people that you like, or you bring in all the people that have the same attributes and characteristics. So you're deficient. It'd be like having a whole team of point guards. Be like, we all get along, we all think the same, but we're all 5'11", and that's not really going to help us in college basketball. And really starting to look at, oh, I need this person with this skill set, and then I just have to hire the right person. Meaning, like, they also have, like, so once I understand I need this person with this skill set, then I just need to find the person that meshes well within the culture. I think there's room for a pretty rigorous debate about which one of those comes first. I think when you're early in the day, you just need people that like mesh and get well and like have the right culture. As you mature as a business, that doesn't work anymore. You still need people that mesh well, but now I need position players. I can't go get more of the same people. I need people that are really good at a thing. Whether it's like people that love admin work, or people that are good with spreadsheets, or people that are good with scheduling, or people that are very process oriented. Because you put the wrong person in the wrong seat, like as things start to scale, it becomes a very, very expensive error.
Sounds like some of the things that you've learned over the years is, one, this idea of meeting people where they're at, whether it's a coach trying to give better cues, better technique, move more towards those mechanics being more dialed in. We got to figure out who's in front of us. If it's a business owner, helping them understand new concepts that maybe they haven't been familiar with or aren't accustomed to, of this is how we have to build strategy and this is how we have to build a team, and continually just focus on where the person's at. And then once I have that dialed in, now I can start to tweak the message, keeping it simple, understanding training is training regardless of the area we're in, and how we educate and share knowledge and information can be similar. So I love that the approach you've taken from seminar staff has paid dividends and helped you in all scenarios of working with a variety of folks. And having had all those different experiences from owner and coach and then seminar staff member and everything you've done with Best Hour, what are the things that get you really excited and get you really fired up to keep working? I mean, you've mentioned this idea, still having a learner's mentality, wanting to dive deep in different concepts. So what are the things that really get you excited and fired up, having been now in the space for, going on 15, 20 years?
I think what's exciting to me is that, I don't know if it's, the universe aligning or any of that stuff, but, honestly, I sit in a pretty unique position in within the overall CrossFit ecosystem, from a standpoint of like, I work for CrossFit in the training department, so I get to see how that machine runs. I run I'm at my affiliate now. I have that for 16 years. I run the affiliate. I know what that's like. I've been on seminar staff. I know what that's like. And now with Best Hour, we're, I think, 900 gyms in. I've got those reps as well. So I have a very unique throughput on the entire ecosystem. And what's fun for me now is like, with all of the context of all of that, plus my experiences over the years of doing those different things, it starts to be really fun for me to see be like, hey, these are what I believe to be like the really good solutions for affiliates problems. And I don't say this with any degree of ego or anything like that, but when I look at certain things and I see certain problems, once I've digested it enough and I'm like, this is the solution, I don't need to ask anybody. I'm not like, hey, what do you think? I mean, I will, but it's simply just to bounce it off of somebody. But if I bring that to the table at this point, like, I've thought about it a lot. And I'm like, nope, that's the answer based on everything that I know, top to bottom, across all of these different, cross sections of the ecosystem. I'm like, because I know what the root problem is. I know generally what's been tried already because I've been here the whole time. But ultimately, I know what the end user actually needs because I am still the end user. And so that's what's fun for me, is that I'm like, oh, we get to legitimately solve problems, not create solutions for problems that we made up, essentially. And that's and I'm not poo-pooing on it, but that is a lot of businesses. Like, oh, you created a solution for a problem that just shouldn't exist, right? It's stuff like that that's exciting to me, because I'm like, oh, we can solve that. I forget where I read this, but like, true entrepreneurs are just problem solvers. They're like, that's a problem, I'm going to solve it. And solving it might mean we just don't do that anymore. Be like, hey, like, why are we doing that? I think I brought this up to you guys, like the merch, like the online store deal, like that one for me. Like, once I did that, I was just like, oh, I already know the pain points because I've been living them for 15, 16 years. And then come to find out that, like, there's just a bunch of solutions in the ecosystem that didn't need to be retooled. Quite frankly, they needed to be circumvented. Like, they were solutions that people didn't need, instead of just giving the end user the actual solution, which is like, hey, you could just do it this way and you can bypass all of this. You're going to have complete control over it. Like, is it flawed in some sense? Yes, everything's flawed. Okay. Move on. No. You found a flaw in that? Great. You're going to find a flaw in everything. Which one do you want? You want the scenario that you have the most control over, or the one that is also flawed that you have less control over? I'll take the first one. So for me, that's what's exciting, is like, I get to have like a legitimate impact on the trajectory of affiliates to create legitimate solutions for their problems, with this caveat, which is probably most important to me, without changing the model or changing the focus of what they're doing. Just teaching them to do it better and providing industry specific solutions that we know are appropriate. I don't want to say right, because I don't think that term fits well, but we know they're appropriate for the affiliate owner. That's what's fun.
Amazing to hear all the perspectives you not only have had, but do have now. And I would go so far as to say you could be considered a thought leader in the CrossFit space just because of the number of perspectives, time, and experiences you've had, which can be hard to communicate that to others when you say, hey, I have this business and this is what we do and this is what we're all about. And then you go look at like, well, what gives you the right to claim those things? And then you have this full body of evidence that supports and says, yeah, like, he's done it. He kind of knows what's going on. If he doesn't, he probably has some ideas on ways it could be improved or enhanced. And have you found as an entrepreneur or a business owner that it can be hard to figure out a way to say that cleanly and plainly? If you're like, hey, I've got things that can help you. And I speak to this because it seems or feels similar to CrossFit gym owners. Hey, I have this thing. It's called CrossFit. It can help you to live a happier and healthier life. And they've experienced it, others have experienced it. And it's like, how do we tell either the story or share it in a way that like resonates with people that they're like, oh yeah, like I want to join that thing, or I want to, take part in Best Hour because of the way they can help people.
This is where I believe I have a distinct advantage in communicating that. And what I mean by that is not because I'm gifted in any way, shape, or form, but because I'm so entrenched in the CrossFit space, meaning I've been doing the affiliate thing for so long, because I've been doing the seminar thing for so long. One of the things, I mean, you've seen it, but like one of the things that was really fun for me several years ago was when I realized I could take the concepts and the models from the level 1 trainer guide, and then I could repurpose them for a business. And that when I realized that by doing so would make the concepts stick for an affiliate owner, because I'm going to take something that you already know and I'm just going to flip it over and we're going to talk about something else, and now you will understand it. That's what gives me a distinct advantage here, is because I can speak directly to an affiliate owner with a level of authority that, and I don't mean my authority, just like the level of authority with regard to having delivered that content for so many years, that I can speak that language and I can speak it, cleanly, because I've had a lot of practice and I've had a lot of feedback on teaching and all of those things. And you brought up the term thought leader. I have no desire to be a thought leader. That's not something I'm interested in. I do care that if I step up and say something, that it's not a platitude. I'm not speaking in the clouds. I want to be like, hey, this is an overarching principle. This is the 30,000 foot version of that. And then I'm going to walk you all the way down into the weeds and tell you why that happens. And I know why, because I've done it many, many times. So I can unpack the whole thing from you or for you. And because I don't love it when people speak in generalities. It's like, don't get me wrong, like an idea is great. And everything that comes from ideas. But at some point, I need you to walk that idea all the way down to the end and tell me, like, okay, how does that fucking change my life? And if you can't do that, well, then it's not super helpful. Like, there's no shortage of ideas out there. Connect the dots for me. So I always try to be really, really diligent about, if I have the privilege of speaking to a group, whether it's trainers or affiliate owners, to make sure that I connect those dots for them. So like, hey, this is not just an idea. I'm gonna architect this idea for you, and I'm gonna walk it all the way down to like you hitting the enter button on your computer or interacting with that athlete. Is by accident, I guess, just of like a couple of different things converging together, and then me realizing like, oh, okay, I can use that over here. And I tell everybody, I'm the luckiest. I do all things CrossFit. I just do it at all levels. So I also don't know if I'm just rambling at this point, but
no, I think it's the perfect concoction of having experience, having some science in there as well of how do people learn. Well, we got to figure out what they know. We can build on that, this idea of scaffolding, and let me take a concept, and then just tweak it a little bit and now you understand a new concept. And
Mhm.
so having not only the experience, but having the language and the way to say it and communicate in a way that resonates. And when it resonates, now people are leaning in because you truly have something useful and meaningful to share with them, which I think is why you've seen Best Hour and Affiliate U be such a successful tool for affiliates out there. And one of the final questions I have for you that I always love asking guests is this idea of guiding principles, values, things like that. Because I'm always fascinated with how people think about and interact with the world. And I know Ackerman's big on values, and other
Mhm.
people are, and done a lot of different exercises. Others have principles or different things that sort of guide or influence the way they
Yeah.
make decisions. Is there something that stands out to you, whether it's a set of values, some principles, guiding behaviors that really kind of influence how you interact with people and how you make sense of things?
Man, I just like pulled this thing up. We actually recorded a video on this. I put together it's called 16 years of affiliate ownership, and I forget how long the video is. I think it's like 43 minutes.
Wow.
And we haven't published it yet because I don't think it's fully edited, but um I think this is actually the rough draft. Because it's funny you just asked that. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I have this written down right here. So I think this is it. Yes, 22. So 22 lessons of from 16 years of affiliate ownership.
Wow.
So you'll be the first person to hear this out loud, right? Outside of Nate and Cody when we shot this.
Yeah.
So I'll just read through them. One, push, not pull. So that's referring to like creating systems, right? Have things pushed to you, and rather than have everything pulled to you. Number two, customer service is the ultimate arbitrage. Otherwise stated as like just doing a good job. It, particularly in today's day and age, is the ultimate advantage. And I think not enough people focus in on that. I was like, just do the basics really, really well. If you say you're going to call somebody back, call them back. Three, complexity fails, simplicity scales. So making things overly complex is a recipe for disaster. Four, and this one is contentious. Retention is king, sales is queen. If you can retain, sales is easier. Sales is required. You need both, but retention makes everything easier. And I like that one because it speaks to doing a good job. Number five, lead metrics trump lag metrics every day of the week. Number six, play the long game. Number seven, be a center for excellence. And this is actually a core thing that I'll probably start talking about a lot more in the future, is I think affiliates misunderstand what their actual role is. And I think their role is actually to make professionals. And by making professionals, the byproduct of that is creating a lot of fitness for other people. But you do it through the coaches. And I don't think people own that, which is like your job is to make the best coaches. Those coaches are to make people fit. Number eight, which speaks to number seven, which is understand the game you're playing. And a lot of people think they're playing the fitness game. And I think if you understood you're playing the coach development game, things would work differently. Number nine, make the customer the hero, not you. Make them the hero of their own story. Number 10, and this is one I've always been pretty good at. I don't know why, but I'm glad I am, is do the boring work. Like I'm totally content doing the hours and hours of shit that nobody else will do in the dark, that nobody ever knows about. Like I'd rather enjoy it to some extent. Number 11, storytelling lasts forever. Number 12, your weaknesses are where you win. And that's kind of speaks to CrossFit and training. But if you carry that over into businesses and understanding like, hey, if you can get good at the things you're bad at, everything else is easier. Number 13, map out your customer experience. Number 14, eliminate friction. Number 15, again, this is focus on results, which is like if you focus on results, the processes tend to work themselves out and they're easier to create efficiency. Number 16, be an expert by being an expert, which is like, you don't just get to say you're an expert at something. You're an expert once you put in a requisite number of hours to speak expertly on something. 17, value for money. A lot of us try to trade time and money, but value for money is a totally different game. Number 18, being everything is being nothing. And this speaks to like who you serve, like who your customers are. Number 19, time is everything. It's the only commodity that we spend all the time and never get any more of. Number 20, the group model always prevails. And we've seen that time and time again. And this is not just referring to CrossFit specifically, but if we look at other like jazzercise and Zumba and some of these other things. Number 21, branding, not marketing, when it comes to, advertising, if you will. And then number 22, amateurs react to pros plan. So yeah, I was just kind of like jotting down like the different things, like what would be like the big ticket things that I've learned that I could map each one of those out to a very specific scenario and instance and walk you through the exact situation where that applies. But those are like the big ticket ones. So it's interesting that you asked that because I literally have it written down right there.
It's fun to hear how you can sum up, 16 plus years of experiences into a few phrases and guiding principles that folks can learn from, take with them, and hopefully cut down on some of the learning curve that we all have. I know personally been very grateful to have gotten to know you and the team over at Best Hour in the ways that you're continuing to impact and influence coaches and owners and others, just trying to figure out how do we make this CrossFit thing not only work and feasible, but something that can turn into a career for a lot of people. So for anyone, interested in either reaching out or connecting, what are the best ways for them to either connect with you or the Best Hour team?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hit me up on Instagram, I'm on there. Most of my content on there is going to be Best Hour related, but it's just Coach J Fern. CrossFit Rife, if you guys are in the Virginia Beach area, you're always welcome to pop in. And then besthour.com, or if you just go to Best Hour of Their Day on Instagram, you'll find us there. But I can be found at all those places. And if I happen to see you at a seminar for a level 1 or a level 2 somewhere, I'd be pumped to spend 2 days with you and talk about CrossFit until we're blue in the face.
Yeah. Great resource, fun to connect with. Thanks so much for taking some time today and connecting. Look forward to the next chance we get to interact both virtually and in person.
Yeah, dude, you going to be in Orlando?
Yeah, that's the game plan.
All right, sweet. The details on that'll be out pretty soon. But no, in all seriousness, I know we gave you a hard time about it on the podcast, but I genuinely appreciate the time. Yeah, thanks for just being a good affiliate owner in the space, dude. I appreciate it.
Thanks.